No, I mean, that was deliberately delayed, the ruling. So, it gets us into the next calendar year for the Supreme Court. So we're diligently waiting.
Ed Sullivan, lobbyist for the Illinois State Rifle Association yesterday, telling me about the status of the case challenging Illinois' gun and magazine ban that's been stuck in the appeals court since it was heard in September. So still no indication as to when that ruling is going to be released. And again, that ruling would be on the constitutionality of the gun ban after a district judge found the law unconstitutional. We'll touch on that more with Ed Sullivan here in a moment, but we connected yesterday to discuss the status of the RIFL Act, the RIFL Act. And this has been a piece of legislation a lot of people have been watching. Hasn't really moved yet. It's got 40 some odd co-sponsors that are Democrats, but Sullivan tells us exactly what this piece of legislation does.
Well, the RIFL Act, cute little name, of course, Responsibility and Firearm License. In essence, what it does is it makes a new license for those that manufacture firearms in the state of Illinois. So that in itself, you would think, okay, well, once again, here we are regulating firearms. But the net effect of this bill, in my opinion, and those in the Second Amendment community, is that this will effectively end retail sales of firearms in Illinois. And let me get to the meat of the bill. And so what this bill is trying to accomplish is to shift healthcare costs from the individual and insurance to the manufacturers, and healthcare costs dealing with firearm-related injuries. And so if there's a shooting between a gangbanger and a cop, that firearm will be labeled as a firearm that was committed in whichever, that if it caused an injury, then we would add up all the costs of healthcare costs and put it in a pile. For this bill, the year one fees that the bill talks about are $821 million. So they're anticipating that you will take this $821 million and spread it out over all the firearm manufacturers that have firearms that caused an injury within the state of Illinois. So if you back into the data on this, $821 million, you have roughly 500,000 firearms that were sold in the state of Illinois. That amounts to over a $1,600 tax per firearm. Now, I think that $500 million also includes private sales. And so you could almost take that in half, and so you're in essence doubling the tax. And so first off, such a huge tax that nobody is going to want to sell firearms in the state of Illinois. Secondary to this is the penalties if you do not, if a manufacturer does not get licensed or file for a license. They're fined $1 million per month if they do not license. FFLs, gun stores, if they would sell a firearm that has been used, that a firearm from a manufacturer that is not licensed, they're subject to $10,000 fine per firearm. So that obviously, in essence, is going to basically end commercial or retail firearm sales in the state of Illinois. And quite frankly, I don't know why like a Springfield Armory or Rock River or any of these companies would stay in Illinois. They would just move out.
Talking with Sullivan, had the question of whether this is going to backfire on Democrats. He says that if this law was to pass and these fees were to be tacked on to the Second Amendment right in the state of Illinois, if firearms retailers leave, if firearms manufacturers leave the state, would this backfire in the Democrats' position of wanting to generate this revenue if everybody's leaving? Here's
well,
Sullivan.
I mean, obviously, yeah. I mean, if think of the sales tax associated with the firearm industry, it's quite a bit, and I don't have those numbers in front of me, but you, in essence, and that's their goal. Their goal is to, these legislators always says, well, we're not here to ban firearms. We believe in hunting. We believe in all this. Well, no, you don't, because there are now over 40 House members that are signed on as co-sponsors that basically are saying to the Second Amendment community, we don't want you to own guns in the state of Illinois. We don't want you to be able to buy guns in the state of Illinois. That's what they're telling us with this bill. Now, obviously, if it passes, gets signed by the governor, it'll be litigated just like everything else we've done. So it's more of a nuisance than anything else. But what happens in the interim? If we go to court and we don't get an injunction, then in essence, I don't know why these manufacturers would even participate in firearm sales in the state of Illinois. There's no exemption for law enforcement. So in essence, law enforcement, if you like Springfield Armory firearms, guess what? You're not gonna be able to get them. It does not touch the private market, at least right now. I'm sure we'll see an amendment to change that. But so retail sales is in essence is going to end.
The RIFL Act has about 40 sponsors. We heard Speaker Welch earlier this year talk about how if there's 60 Democrats on a bill, he'll put it on the board in the Illinois House. So are we getting close to that point? Or is the RIFL Act going to remain in committee? Again, Ed Sullivan from the Illinois State Rifle Association sounding off.
Yeah, I talking to some of our allies in Springfield, they're concerned as well. Senator Joyce is a Democrat, and he has been a pretty steadfast ally. And he has come to me and said, get me the talking points. We need to start working this because he's concerned. And so, I think listening to some other allies, and obviously on the Republican side, we have a deep bench of folks that will support us, but they're all concerned because this has gotten a lot of headway. We have groups that historically have not been involved with this. I mean, so this RIFL Act has an association that's being led by doctors and surgeons that have said, hey, there's too much. I've seen too many shootings and we need to do something about it. I don't know what charging a fee to a manufacturer is going to do to change a gangbanger from who shouldn't have a firearm to begin with, shooting somebody. There's no deterrent here. It's penalty only. And so once again, trying to do something noble, they're just not getting to the source of how to do it.
So as the gun owners in Illinois look at the RIFL Act and the prospect of that coming up during this legislative session this spring, they meet until May 31st, you've got big questions. But also, you've got gun owners still waiting for the outcome in the appeals court of the challenge against the Protect Illinois Communities Act. And that is the gun and magazine ban and registry that was enacted by Governor J.B. Pritzker in January of 2023. Lawsuits all throughout 23, going up and down the judiciary. Even in 2024, the Southern District of Illinois, in one case, it was consolidated with 4 others, finding that the law was unconstitutional based off of a bench trial, a 4-day bench trial. So that was in 2024, whenever the district judge found it unconstitutional. And then you had the gun owners waiting months for the appeals court to even take that case up. And they did hear the case back in September of 25. And we're still here sitting, waiting for the outcome in the appeals court. And all this, of course, expected to go to the U.S. Supreme Court. But Sullivan saying there really hasn't been much of a change at the appeals court as to are they going to announce a ruling anytime soon?
No, I mean, that was deliberately delayed, the ruling. So, it gets us into the next calendar year for the Supreme Court. So we're diligently waiting.
Well, a lot of gun owners waiting as well. But if you recall, when the district court found the law unconstitutional, it went to the appeals court, right? And there was a stay on essentially, upending the law. The appeals court kept that stay in place. And then it was months. Then you had groups like the State Rifle Association say, hey, we have a district judge saying the law is unconstitutional and the appeals court isn't doing anything. And we still have gun owners that have an outcome in a district court saying the law is unconstitutional. They're being harmed by the law being in place. When can we get at least a date for when the case is going to be heard in the appeals court? And then literally that same day, the appeals court put out the schedule for when they would hear the case. They heard that case in September. Sullivan saying that they had some high hopes, but things have kind of fizzled out for at least some resolution to this ongoing question.
Really nothing. We were encouraged by the federal DOJ, Department of Justice, that has chimed in and has been supportive. We had hoped that that would move the needle. It has not really moved the needle. And so we're not going to be in this calendar. It would surprise me if we get into this Supreme Court calendar coming up. And so, it gets pushed out even farther.
We'll be watching and updating you as to the status of the state's gun and magazine ban, but also the status of the RIFL Act, the responsibility in firearms licenses. And we're going to see movement there at the State House this spring. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell and stay up to date here with the Center Square.